Welcome to today's class. In today's class, we will be considering ASP.NET Checkbox Control. The checkbox control displays a small box that can be used by an end user to check or uncheck an item. When an end user checks a checkbox control, its checked property is set to true. Conversely, when an end user unchecks a checkbox control, the checked property is set to false, which means that when a checkbox control is checked, the checked property of that checkbox control is true. And if a checkbox control is unchecked, the checked property of that checkbox control is false. You can say that your checkbox control returns true or false. And after an end user has checked or unchecked a checkbox control, we can evaluate the control's checked property in the code behind to perform an action based on the truth or falseness of the checked property. By default, a checkbox control is unchecked. Also, by default, a checkbox control doesn't perform any action upon being checked or unchecked, which means nothing happens by default when you check or uncheck a checkbox control. If we want an action to be performed when a checkbox control is checked, alright, we must set its auto post back property to true. Now let's consider some ASP.NET checkbox control properties. The properties we are going to be looking at in this session are properties that you will find out that you'll be using more frequently as you code. First, we look at auto post back. The auto post back property gets or sets a value indicating whether the checkbox state automatically posts back to the server when it's clicked, which means does the checkbox when clicked or unclicked, when checked or unchecked, does it post something to the server? Alright. Now we have course validation. This gets or sets the value indicating whether validation is performed when a checkbox control is selected. Checked property. This gets or sets the value indicating whether a checkbox control is checked. Text property. This gets or sets the text label associated with the checkbox. Validation group. This gets or sets the group of controls for which the checkbox control causes validation when it's posted back to the server. Now, there's one particular event that you will find yourself using most of the time when working with checkbox control, and it's no other event than the checked changed event. It occurs when the value of the checked property changes between posts to the server. So when you checked a checkbox, the check change event fires. When you uncheck the checkbox, the checked change event also fires. Now there are more properties and more methods that our checkbox control has. You can find out more about them from this link. Now let's switch over to our Visual Studio environment and get some codes up. Alright, we are now in our Visual Studio environment. We are going to write some codes to test our checkbox control to see how it works and understand it far more better than we have seen already. Okay, so I have created a project titled Checkbox Control, checkbox_control. You can do the same at your end, or you can give it any name that you want. So, as we usually do, we'll create our web form. Right click on the project, go to Add, and then look for web form in the list. Give it a name, check page. I'll give it check page as a name. Now click OK. Now this is my markup, HTML markup, ASP.NET markup. I'm going to click on split view so that I can see my design view and my code view at the same time. As usual, I'm going to drag a checkbox control from the toolbox under standard category onto our web page. Dragging a checkbox control from the toolbox to the web page or the web form creates a checkbox control, and that is how you create a checkbox control. However, that's not what we're going to do here. We want to create a page that has meaning, that makes sense. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be putting on our web page is a label. So drag a label to come in between the div controls, div elements that you have here. All right, and our label, this first label, we are not going to give it any ID because we are not going to code against it. The text we are going to give as filters. So that's the text. Okay, we're also going to set a property, font bold property, and we'll set it to true. Okay, we can refresh the design view to see what we have. So you can see what we have here. Next, we're going to add a checkbox. So drag a checkbox from the toolbox right here. Let's press enter here. We're going to add a line break here so that our elements or our controls are well aligned. See, we have a checkbox here right now. For this checkbox, we're going to name it CHK footwear. CHK footwear. That's the ID. And we'll set the text property. Remember the text property? We're going to set it to footwear. Then we add a line break. Okay, so we're going to be adding 3 more checkboxes, and then we edit them. So I'll copy this, then I'll paste, and I'll paste. So 3, so I'll paste the third one. All right, so what we're going to do here, we're going to edit these 3 checkboxes to reflect what we want. For the first one, we're going to change the ID to CHK clothing, and the text property to clothing. For the next one, it will be CHK tennis equipment, and text property we set to tennis equipment. For the last checkbox, I'm going to set its ID to CHK soccer equipment, and the text property soccer equipment. Now that we are done with adding our checkboxes, we're going to add another control. This time around, we're adding the button control. I'll put it right there. For our button control, we're going to name it btn set filter. I'm going to set the text property to set filter. Now for our button control, we have to create a click event. So how do we do that? We'll call the onClick property, on click event right there, equal to you need to double click on create new event for that event to be created on the code behind file. Okay, double click. So you can see it has entered the name of the click event for you. I'll show that to us when we get to the code behind file. Now on this page, lastly, we're going to be adding another label control. So we add this label control right here, down. So for this label control, we're going to give it a name. We're going to set the ID property to LBL filters, and we'll take away the text control, text property, and add 4-color property and set it to green. So 4-color will change the color of the label control, of the text for the label control. Okay, now that we are done with our ASP and HTML markup here, let's now go to the code behind file. But before we do that, let's see what our page looks like in the design view. So just click on this yellow bar to synchronize. So this is what our page will look like, okay, in the design view. Now let's get to our code behind file. Right click and then choose view code. Great. As you can see, this is our click event that was created for us here. Okay, so this is where we begin to type some codes. So before we start coding, let me explain to us what we want to achieve. Let me get back to our ASPX page. What we want to achieve is when we click on one of these checkboxes and we click on set filter, this label here should show us a message. The message is going to be relating to whichever checkbox we clicked or which checkboxes we have clicked. So let's get back to our code. So we'll create a variable string str string filters, and we'll set the value to you are filtering your search on colon space, and then we add a semicolon at the end. So we've created our variable. Now we begin to test for which checkbox is clicked, and to do that we make use of our if conditional statement, our if statement. All right, so if chk footwear dot checked. So what we're saying here is that if the footwear checkbox is checked, okay, sorry, dot checked, okay, then this should happen. Our variable string filters should then be equal to string filter filters plus footwear. So this is concatenation happening here. Remember to add this space after footwear, after the R here. So we go on and also check for other checkboxes. So if chk dot clothing this time around is checked, then so let me just copy this up to here so that we don't waste too much time typing. So this is then going to be okay plus clothing. So move to the next one. If CHK, next is tennis equipment checked, string filters equals to string filters plus tennis equipment. And we'll check for the next one. If CHK soccer equipment checked, see if it's true. If it's checked, string filters equals to string filter soccer plus soccer equipment. Okay, after that we then deal with our label. LBL filters dot text equals to string filters. That's what we want to do. So now that we are done coding, we'll save our work and then we'll test our code. Click on the run button here and wait for it to load. It's loading on my other screen. Okay, here it is. So here is our page. So let's test it. Let's select clothing and click on search filter. Now you see you are filtering your search on clothing. Let's click on soccer and uncheck clothing. You're filtering your search on soccer equipment. Okay. Now let's select more than one option here. Select soccer and footwear. You can see. Select it all. Okay. So now that we've seen it in action, let's close our browser. Now, mind you, you can style your checkbox the way you want using CSS. It's up to you. Okay, we've talked about CSS before in our previous module, so you can go back, freshen up your memory and come try something out here. So this is checkbox. In our next class, we'll be looking at radio button. I see the radio button as a cousin to checkbox control. So I'll see you at the next class. Thank you for watching.